Hello, everybody. Elijah and Jeffrey here from Miracle to Australia. Just before we start the recording, we just have a few disclaimers. The first disclaimer comes from me, just saying that during the interview, you will be seeing me drinking out of a neutralizer gallon bottle, and that has water in it. It doesn't have neutralizer liquid, and I would not recommend anyone drink straight neutralizer liquid out of the bottles. So that's the disclaimer from me. On to Jeffrey.
Yeah, hi all. Thanks for listening. Just before we get started on this video, I would just like to make a couple of points clear which will be relevant to this video. First is Phil Thomas is not a doctor, so he was reluctant to answer any medical questions which came up. But after extensive talks with Phil and also my own and others' experience, I can see how well the detoxified iodine works. But for some reason, if this is not happening, then I believe this is because my iodine receptor sites, which take up the iodine, could be blocked up with toxins, heavy metals, plastics, etc. So to combat this and clean out these receptor sites to allow the uptake of iodine, I would use Miracle 2 neutralizer gel directly on my thyroid and whole throat area, and I would do this several times a day. I would also keep taking the neutralizer liquid internally and having regular baths in the Miracle 2 soaps. Some other things that may also help clean out these receptor sites, one is Edgar Cayce's sulfur salts, which we have actually ordered, and these should be here mid-December 2022 this year. Also MSM, and some other homeopathies may also work as well too. So thanks for listening, and please enjoy this presentation.
Cool. Thanks for watching.
Nice. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. We are here with Phil Thomas and Jeffrey Williams, and we are talking about the Edgar Cayce detoxified atomic iodine. How are you guys going today?
Yeah, terrific.
Yeah, I'm very good. And also, this is Elijah. He hasn't introduced himself.
I'm Elijah. Nice to meet everybody. So yeah, I was thinking it'd be cool to sort of learn a little bit about maybe Phil, your background with iodine and how you first got into, how you discovered it, how you discovered Edgar Cayce's things and things like that as well. Because
A long time ago, um, I was reading Casey books in high school, and there's a lot of them actually. This was quite a while ago, so the whole Casey movement was garnering some interest back in the 60s and 70s, and then finally in the late 80s I ended up moving to Virginia Beach, where the Edgar Cayce Institute is. They call it the Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE, and in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And it's the place where Cayce, in a reading, said that this would be the best place to set it up because, the energy there was right. And, it's really a beautiful place. It's near Norfolk, which is the largest military installation in the country, actually. But the beach itself is really beautiful, and it's brings in like 100,000 tourists every weekend during the summer, and there's just lined with hotels, and so it's a little hectic in the summer, and during the winter just as quiet as can be. But that's where Cayce, back I don't know, let's see, I'd have to go back a ways to try and remember, but he decided that would be the place to build the hospital that he wanted to build, and he had the backing of a couple of stockbrokers that were successful in the market. And this was during the 20s and 30s, which was later on in Casey's life. He passed on in 1945. But during his lifetime, he gave over 14,000 documented readings, and each reading was maybe 3 to 4 pages, typewritten, double spaced. So you can imagine, I mean, it's an awful lot of information to go through. And it's all been digitized, since I was looking at it, and it's all on tape, all on disc. But you still have to sort of have some idea what it is you're looking at there, because the language is a little different, and the way he presents things, he doesn't actually label. Like most people came to him that had health issues, illness of some sort or another, and they usually wrote to him, and then he would put himself into a self-induced trance state, and somebody would be there to ask questions that the person had written, and record all this information in shorthand, and then later it was typed up, and so on and so forth. So anyway, it's the largest body of psychically derived information anywhere, and it's what I consider to be the sort of the if you're looking at other forms of information that are psychically derived or whatever, you have to go back to the source, which is Casey, to test and see if these concepts are viable or not, because Casey laid it all out. About 9,000 readings were health related, and the other readings covered just a wide assortment of different issues, topics, a lot of reincarnation and stuff like that.
Cool. Very good. So I didn't realize he built that hospital way back then.
The idea was to have a facility where people could come, maybe for a few days, learn what it was they needed to learn in order to utilize the suggestions, so that, when they went home, they could continue doing it. Unfortunately, the hospital was built during the late 20s, or during the middle 20s, and then not too long after they got it done, the Depression hit. And Casey warned his backers that, they needed to get ready for it, but they didn't. Because back in what was it, 1929, August, I think, or something like that. And the Great Depression hit, and it just wiped out the finances across the entire planet. And they lost the hospital, and it went through several incarnations after that, during the following decades. And then finally, back in the late 50s, they sort of picked it up again. And, it did quite well for, like I say, up until, while I was there, up until about 2000. And then
wow.
They started getting in too political, and
So you,
it's since gone by the wayside.
You were actually at the hospital. Were you working at the hospital, or just?
They never really utilized as a hospital. They were too concerned about. I mean, the contemporary people. They were too concerned about, the political implications.
Yep.
So. It's all natural health, so they actually could. And they do have a massage school there where they teach massage, but even that is kind of disconnected from the readings.
Yep.
So those readings, that's how he brought in the iodine, the detoxified iodine, is it?
During that time, from like the 20s, 30s, and then he passed on in 1945. So for about 25 years, he gave readings, and during that course of that time, those 14,000 documented readings, there's over 4,400 occurrences of the term etomidine or atomic iodine in the readings. So it's actually the cornerstone to the whole philosophy that he presents for natural health, because Casey understood that, if you're going to, correct an imbalance, then you have to address the core issues, which have to do with body chemistry. And the thyroids are right at the center of the whole glandular process. So in order to get the body, to a point where it can help itself, you have to balance the glandular process. And once you do that, then you can address these other issues.
Yep.
It was an important concept, and he talked about it, utilizing the detoxified iodine, because iodine in its natural state is actually a poison. So you have to detoxify it through an electrification process that he talked about.
Yep.
I have heard that raw iodine is kind of like 50-50, where it's like it kind of works, it kind of doesn't work. And I've tried raw iodine before, and it felt really heavy and toxic and really kind of gross, and
Yeah.
And then I've tried this iodine, the Edgar iodine, and it's just so easy to absorb in the body. Like, you don't feel gross or anything afterwards, and you can feel it straight away. So yeah, it's interesting, the difference. Like, but how is
it's
iodine?
interesting because it's an essential element.
Yep.
Mm.
So what's the difference
Can't take it
between
as raw.
what's the difference between potassium iodine and raw iodine?
Well, potassium is another element. They're both elements.
Yep.
So when you bond potassium and iodine together, you have what's called a salt, and the iodine becomes, potassium iodine is actually water soluble.
So
there's other salts you can bond it with too.
They bonded that with the potassium so they could kind of take it and help the body to absorb it. Was that the kind of theory they were?
See, the premise is that because the body is 3/4 water, if you introduce an element that's water soluble, then the body will be able to uptake it easier.
Yep.
That's actually not true.
Okay.
But for iodine was first isolated, and that's a whole nother story, a couple hundred years ago. And since then, every buddy that's looked at this has thought, well, logically, it makes sense if it's water soluble, then the body will be able to assimilate it easier. But it's actually not true. So that's been going on for a couple hundred years. I'm only one person, the only person who knows that. So it's kind of hard to convince everybody else that they've been wrong for 200 years.
You need that charge so the body can it needs to be charged at the right frequency so that the body can see it or absorb it.
Well, what happens is, when you run it through this electrification process, you take a vial of the iodine, you suspend it in an acid bath that has poles on either side of this glass vial, right? Because you need to run electricity through the poles in the solution, right? With the vial in between the poles. And what that does is the electricity doesn't penetrate the glass, but it generates this intense magnetic field. And it ends up dropping an ion. And when that happens, then it's in a form that the body can fully recognize and assimilate.
Yep. Oh, very good.
So that was key. That's what Casey offered.
And like, what's the absorption rate of it? Like, of the Casey iodine, like, does it absorb straight into the bloodstream instantly? Like, or is it? What's the process of absorption?
Well, the primary place where it's going to go is the thyroids. And the thyroids have receptor sites on them that are designed specifically to capture iodine. So if you eat seafood, you get iodine in your diet because iodine only bonds with living things in the ocean.
Right.
But, iodine is, there's a little more to it than that. But the thyroids are right at the center of the whole glandular process. and they absorb, the bulk of the iodine when you take it. When you eat seafood or whatever, the iodine stimulates the thyroids, keeps them running, and then also protects them from radiation.
Cool.
And what about the pineal gland? I've heard it's good for that as well. Iodine.
When you start to get into the master glands, the pineal and the pituitary, it's a different story. See, the pineal and the pituitary, they give the commands. Okay, they're sort of like at the top of the heap, right up here, right? And they send a signal to the rest of the body down through the glandular system, and it says, we need to do this for whatever activity that's going on. It's continuously changing and adjusting and adapting to whatever the given situation is. And then the information comes back up and it says, well, okay, well, this is where we are now. Well, the pineal and the pituitary don't actually take that read. The thyroid and the parathyroid are like a sounding board. And they actually read the information that's coming back up and they say, okay, now they send the signal to the pineal and pituitary and they say, this is where we are now. And then they can adjust accordingly. So when the thyroids are removed or not working or whatever, toxic or whatever, that information, the pineal and pituitary cannot get the read on what's going on in the body, and so they're just guessing. So that's the primary function of the thyroids, and nobody knows about it because nobody's ever actually figured out how to stimulate the thyroids and protect them from radiation. And once you get that figured out, then you can do the rest of the glandular system because the thyroids are at the center and everything else radiates out basically from there. Even though the pineal and the pituitary give the commands, without the thyroids, they're basically useless.
And it's interesting. I've heard something like that. Whereas it's like if your thyroid isn't functioning, like if you go to bed, and you'll feel like you're awake, and then when you're awake, you feel like you're asleep. So things are kind of like reversed because you're getting different signals and things don't know how to respond. Is that sort of similar to what you're saying? The thyroid isn't giving out proper signals. Everything else is just guessing, kind of thing.
Well, if you look at the sleep cycle, right in the middle of it, you have the REM, right? The rapid eye movement, which goes on for about 45 minutes. That's the deep part of the sleep cycle. So when you get that REM, when you go into that sleep cycle, that pattern allows the body to get sufficient rest. And if you drink excessive alcohol and drugs and stuff like this, or if there's other issues or problems, you might not be able to get into that REM sleep. And if you don't get it, you're never fully rested. And once again, it's a glandular function basically. So you got to have the thyroids functioning in order to get into REM sleep. And the rest of the sleep cycles that happen around that, all sort of relate to the REM sleep just the same as the glandular system relates to the thyroids at the center.
Interesting. Thank you for that information. That's great to know. Answered a few questions that I've sort of been wondering about different people that don't sleep very long each night.
It's a glandular imbalance usually. Yep. Sometimes people are affected or sensitive to electromagnetic waves or something like that can interfere with your sleep patterns or something like that.
Yep.
There's all kinds of stuff going on Earth that we aren't aware of.
Cool. Yeah, for sure.
I had you go.
Sorry, I was just going to put it over to you. You had a few questions there.
Oh yeah, I was. It's funny whenever I tell anyone to take iodine, They're all like, "Oh no, it's okay. I get plenty in my iodized salt." Um, what's is that? I feel a bit funny about iodized salt because I've heard some things about it, but what's your take on it? Like, can you actually get enough
Well,
iodide from iodized salt? You know?
the
Yeah.
government sent out a study. They're looking at this is back during Casey's time, and they're looking at goiter, and they have a scientific body that says, well, we think that goiter is actually iodine deficiency, and half the scientific body said, well, there's no proof of that. So they sent out teams into the field, and they went down to the ocean and they studied people's thyroids there. And then they went inland and they studied them there. And then they went up into the mountains and studied them there. Well, the further away from the ocean that you get, the more goiter you have. And back in Casey's day, it was kind of a serious problem. There were a lot of people with goiter. And so what they did was they figured out that goiter was a result of iodine deficiency. So that's when they started iodizing salt. The U.S. was the first to do it. And what they do is they spray trace amounts of iodine on the salt as it's passing through like a channel, and it's enough to deal with most cases of goiter. And then they thought, oh, good. See, this is back in the days when the government was actually working for people and trying to figure out how to help the general population. And sure enough, it worked. So after a few years, they thought, oh, good. Well, we got that taken care of. Well, what's next? Not realizing that there was a whole lot more to the question about health and well-being than just trace amounts of raw iodine and salt. But if you stop and think about it, and you look at the cultures on the planet, who are the healthiest cultures, like the Japanese or the Icelandic, culture. These people have been eating primarily a diet from the ocean for hundreds, thousands of years. And that's why they were the healthiest people on the planet. When we started introducing iodine into the food source for our culture, and then the rest of the civilized world sort of picked up on it later on, we became the healthiest culture on the planet. And as the Japanese looked at us and they thought, oh boy, we'd really love to have a McDonald's on our block, then eventually their health sort of swung in the wrong direction. But stop and look at the Japanese culture. I mean, they had next to Chernobyl, they had the worst nuclear power meltdown anywhere on the planet, and it's only 80 miles from Tokyo, and yet they're not really even affected by it that much. Why? Wow. Because they have primarily a seafood diet. It's iodine rich. Their thyroids are protected because they have so much iodine in their system. And the radiation hasn't really, if that hadn't happened anyplace else where there wasn't, the people weren't, consuming. The Japanese eat seafood 3 times a day.
Wow.
So they don't care what kind it is. They just love it, whatever it is.
How long would you have to spend in the ocean to get a sufficient amount of iodine? Like,
you can live near the ocean and get quite a bit in the air.
Oh, really?
Wow. Yeah. Yep. Cool. Okay. That's why people go for the sea change.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's why they want the sea change. Well, they call it the sea change.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they call it the sea change, where everybody moves to to the beachside suburbs and
but now
get to the ocean.
You gotta move away from the ocean now because the ocean levels are going up.
All right. Or just build a floating house or something.
Yeah. Well, now they're going for tree change. Let's get into the forest.
Yeah, I'll go to a mountain change. Sounds good. But,
iodine's very good at killing bacteria and viruses and stuff. There was there's an area south of Virginia Beach, North Carolina, where they grow a lot of the pigs that people consume in this country,
Mm.
which is large numbers. And they have these ponds that they put all the sewage in, and then it just sort of sits there. And every once in a while, one of them breaks open and floods the river, and it floods down to the ocean. Well,
Wow.
the sewage is one thing, but it develops this bacteria that makes it very dangerous. And nobody can swim in those rivers or use them for fishing or anything, because every once in a while another sewage pond breaks open and ends up flooding, and it's bad. The bacteria is deadly. But by the time it gets down to the ocean, the iodine in the ocean kills it.
Wow.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Amazing, yeah.
So if we're having any kind of health issues at all, then we'd want to be either taking detoxified iodine or moving to the ocean, living off seafood.
Yeah, if you look at the Japanese, they eat seaweed every day like it's just part of, we eat salads, they eat seaweed.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard that seaweed's the best form of iodine you can get.
There's different seaweeds, so some of it's really rich in iodine, some of it's not that much.
Okay, cool. What's the best type of seaweed then? Do you know offhand?
Well, probably the furthest away from civilization, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's what they say, and I believe it.
Yeah, because I've heard there's a lot of toxic metals in the fish.
You start to think about the oceans are getting ruined.
Yeah, whereas I've also heard that seaweed, while it absorbs heavy metals, it doesn't release them. Even once you eat it, it holds on to them. Apparently.
Wow.
Seaweed is an interesting food because it has a lot of trace elements in it, not just iodine.
Yep.
Very healthy.
Very good.
Is iodine good for? I mean, I've heard it's good for removing heavy metals out of the body. Is that true?
No, not really.
Dang.
The glandular system is controls all the chemistry of the body. So when you get the thyroids up and running, and that protects. See, the reason everybody's thyroid is down, and I mean like 95% of the world's population has low thyroid. It's beyond epidemic. Is because radiation. If you go back, 30 years before everybody had a cell phone and a laptop and a desktop and all this other stuff, it was bad, but now it's beyond. Because you're getting a small dose of radiation when you sit in front of your computer or when you talk on your phone. It's not a lot of radiation, but when you do it for 20 or 30 years, every day, all day long, your thyroids are going to shut down. And that's what everybody does. Try and take somebody's phone away from them.
Can't live without my phone. What are you talking about?
It cannot be done.
Especially when cell phones are so close to the head as well. People are always talking on them.
Yeah. And there's a lot of radiation from, I mean, I don't know how it is down there, but we have cell towers on every bump and hill. And, you go into a city now, 5G doesn't have the same penetration as like 4G, right? And everybody in the US has 5G now, right? Well, they have these little transmitters on every building in New York City. So you walk down the street and you see them, they're everywhere.
Wow.
And you're getting bombarded by this stuff continuously. People haven't really begun to realize the effect of it yet, but in 20 years, we'll all look back at this and go, wow, that wasn't such a good idea. And the towers, they're everywhere,
So basically, it'd be very advantageous for everybody to take, to supplement on iodine, on a good
Yeah.
iodine.
Or the detoxified iodine,
Mm.
especially.
Yeah. It's been a problem that the medical community didn't figure out, because as far as they got was like, oh, goiter, and Casey said, look over here, here's the answer. You run it through this electrification process, and then everybody can take it, and it's not going to be a poison anymore.
Yep. Awesome. Awesome.
So yeah,
Oh,
when
I
looked
love
at
this
it,
stuff. I mean, as you know,
Yeah.
Phil, I've been ordering it off you for probably 12 odd years, 14 years, something like that.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
I love the stuff. If I've had a bad night's sleep, or I had no sleep and I'm feeling pretty groggy and can't wake up, I make sure I have some iodine in, and just bing, I'm just wide awake again, alert. So it's just definitely works very well on that respect. And I can't say I've gotten sick much in the last 14 years either. So yeah, I love the stuff. I can't get enough. Well, it's not that I can't get enough of it, but I make sure I have it most days.
Yeah.
I'll forget about it for a few days, and I'll notice I'll start going downhill a little bit. Start getting a bit tireder, and the pathogens are building up.
What I tell people is, use it as a rinse and a gargle, because it's getting to the point now. There's other people that are mass marketing their version. I trained a couple of people years ago, and they went off and started doing these, like, mass market things. Iodine's a very powerful element, so you got to be careful with it. Even in its detoxified state, you don't want to do too much. That's the point. You don't have to do too much of it. Once it's detoxified, the body can absorb and assimilate 100%, right? So you don't need much.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's it's another one of those things where I'm just sort of trying to baby step this thing into society, because there's always going to be other entrepreneurs that are going to say, "Oh, I'm going to make some money on this,"
Mm.
and then they push it and push it. There's a bunch of doctors now that are pushing it, but they're not pushing detoxified iodine. They're pushing raw iodine, and it's dangerous because they don't know what they're doing. And I'm partly responsible, because I'm the guy who introduced them to the concept in the first place, and then they went off and they decided, well, we don't need detoxified iodine. We'll just give everybody iodine, and it can be helpful, but can also be dangerous.
I know my wife Tracy, and I probably spoke to you about this years and years ago, because she actually had her thyroid removed many years ago, probably when she was in her 20s. It blew up so big it went right down to her whole chest and was suffocating her. But she always had problem getting her T cells correct. It was never ever get it correct, and she started on the detoxified iodine, and it became a lot better. It really made it was really a game changer for her. So really helped a lot, because she's on thyroxine, and they could just never ever get those T cells right, and that whole glandular fever, the glandular system right.
Well, take a number. There's millions of women in the U.S. that have had their thyroids removed. I mean, it's just a tragedy, because once they're gone, they leave usually the doctor will leave a little bit in, so the meds have something to bounce off of.
Yep.
But I mean, it's arguably the most important gland in the body, and the medical community just decided it's a throwaway, you know.
Yep.
Understanding again. They don't understand. They don't teach it in medical school, you know.
Mm.
They don't really need teach much about the endocrine process or how it works at all, you know,
Yep.
and much less about, you know, like, okay, well, you know, you can correct a lot of your problems by eating properly, you know. It's like they don't get any of that in med school.
No, it's a very small part of their curriculum.
That's what Casey talked about. You know, he said, look, you know, if you correct your diet, you know, you get some, you know, get your skeletal structure aligned. You know, you do body massage, do the colonics, and you know, you do these other, you know, like tonics and things like that. Then, you know, you put that whole package together, and you can get the body back to a point where it can fix itself.
Yeah, for sure. And the body can fix itself. It's just a matter of giving it the right tools.
And then, you know, there were a couple of like biomagnetic batteries and things that Casey utilized to actually rebuild damaged nerve tissue. And that's when I first went to Virginia Beach, was the beginning of the 90s. I was interested in that concept. And, you know, the Casey readings have been around for a long time. There was 1,000 readings on this one battery concept where Casey said, you can use this to address all degenerative disorders.
Wow.
And there's like 150 of them in the reading, 150 different degenerative disorders. So I go to the beach and I said, well, let's try this and see, you know, because the people that were there had been doing this stuff, but they never bothered to try and actually adhere to the specs and the readings. And I said, let's build the equipment the way Casey said to build it, and then try and use it the way he suggested and see what happens. And you were saying earlier about how you got run out of town. Well, that's what happened to me too, so I can relate, you know.
Yeah.
There were a whole bunch of people that started recovering from these degenerative disorders that the medical community says are incurable. And they pushed the panic button and they said, you know, we need to get rid of this guy.
Yep.
And they did.
We'll have to talk to you more off air about that one.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind grabbing one of those.
So, yeah.
I did have a great story. A customer, I think we put it in one of our newsletters, about a customer who had a cyst on her thyroid or somewhere around her thyroid area. And the doctors were going to remove it, and it was also connected to her. There's a bone there that's similar to the thyroid name. No, it's a little bone that's somewhere near there. And anyway, something happened to her dog, and she had to cancel the appointment, the operation. And in the meantime, she started she started, it was divine intervention. She started rubbing a little bit of the detoxified iodine on the cyst, and then putting the Miracle 2 gel on to help that absorb it in. And by the time she went back to the doctor to reschedule her appointment, which was a few months later, they couldn't find it. And they said, well, we can't operate on something that we can't find. So she was pretty rapt about that. And so between those two things, it worked a miracle for her. So it's just a great story for you. Just a bit of accomplishment.
Yeah. You know, that's what keeps you going. You know, you know that you're helping people, and you know that's a reward in and of itself. So
Yep.
Makes it all worthwhile.
I was wondering, you said something like you can gargle with iodine because as you said, it kills bacteria and things like that. But Does it have uses like on the skin? If you get like a cut or something, can you like water iodine down and put it onto the cut, or does it have other uses besides, ingesting it?
Yeah. If you go into the hospital for a surgical procedure, they will, before they open you up, they will take a sponge on a stick and they'll dunk it into a jar of Providine or something, iodine, and they'll swab the whole area, not realizing that all this iodine is being absorbed into the body, and
Oh
you're
no.
out, so you're not, you can't tell the doctor you're freaking out. But once again, the medical community doesn't understand this, but it's prevented a lot of other kinds of infections. Staph is very common in hospitals, and bacteria and viruses and so on and so forth. But the teeth are actually sort of, and the way I describe them is that they're the grand central station of the energy body. So every time you eat and drink, bacteria builds up between the teeth and the gums, and they're really two different kinds of material. So as the bacteria builds up, then you end up going to the dentist, and the dentist says, "Oh, well, for $500, I can do a deep cleaning," and it's like they tear up your gums and they clean it, and then the next day you got bacteria back down there again. So what was the point? The point was the dentist can make $500.
And you get that fresh, minty aftertaste of cleanliness.
So yeah, Listerine, stuff like that is really very good for the general population. Iodine's better because you need iodine in your body. It's an essential element.
Yep.
And any way that you can deal with bacteria buildup in the mouth is good, but this is really the best I've ever found. I put like 4 or 5 drops in a half ounce of water, rinse and gargle, 10 seconds.
Cool. Yep. Yeah, well, I understand that if you can kill the bad bacteria in your mouth and not kill the good bacteria, your mouth is going to thrive, and that's your basis of your health, because everything in your mouth is getting swallowed and going down into your gut, and so on. So you're absorbing all of that. So
I also
if you can keep that good bacteria built up in your mouth, and get rid of the bad bacteria, you'll be a much healthier person all over.
Bacteria is what causes the problems in the mouth. That's what causes the degenerative process, the decay. And if you can kill the bacteria, then you don't have to go to the dentist. How much does the average person spend on dental visits every year? When you add that up over a lifetime, it's tens of thousands of dollars just to try and keep that. Well, you can avoid all that with a half ounce bottle of iodine.
Yeah, and it's quite cheap.
$20.
Yeah, in the US.
Yeah, right.
Oh, very good. Yep.
What
The
happens?
other thing is, it's like with the thing I wanted to mention was that with these pandemics going around and stuff like that, this epidemic with COVID and all this stuff, you've got to keep the glandular system and the autoimmune. See, the thyroids are also responsible for how the autoimmune system responds. So when your body's attacked, if the thyroids are running, your autoimmune system is going to kick on. If they're not running, it won't. So if you rinse and gargle, you set up the barrier basically, because when you go out in public, you're going to get exposed to viruses. And believe me, it killed 1 million people in this country. in the last 2 years.
Wow.
And this was a relatively mild virus. You know, I don't want to scare anybody, but it's best to protect yourself because you're not going to be able to prevent the next one. And the next one in 10 or 20 years or whatever might be much worse than this one.
So it wasn't that it was a really strong virus. It was just that their immune systems weren't functioning because maybe they weren't having
It was
iodine
thyroid,
or thyroid. And, yeah.
The whole immune system was low.
So you get a little bit in your bloodstream every time you rinse and gargle, and you kill a lot of the bacteria that's causing the problems in the mouth. If you do that every day, you know, you've handled a lot of the issues that most people are confused about. Because we get bombarded by this media that says, "Oh, well, you know, you have to take these vaccinations," and then you've got this counterculture that says, "You know, I don't believe anything that the medical community says because everybody I know that's been through the medical system has gotten messed up." You know, can you blame them really? I mean, the medical community isn't all bad. They're trying to do what the best they can. They just have a limited understanding of how the body works.
Yep.
I had a question. What can you do if you take too much iodine? Because I hear it quite often. People will say they've taken too much, and I've taken too much, and I've sort of been sitting there like, oh man, like you got to kind of wait it out because you get this like real hectic feeling and everything. But is there anything you can actually do to help your body flush it out if you've taken too much? I heard salt, like if you can take a fair bit of salt or something.
Magnesium probably is the best thing because when the thyroids get overamped, you know, you tend to get anxiety ridden, brings up anger issues, stuff like that. You know, it's a stimulant. So magnesium will counterbalance it, which is like, you know, dump some Epsom salts into a hot bath, like a pound of Epsom salts into a hot bath and soak for about, you know, 45 minutes. And that'll balance it out.
Yep. We just happen to also sell nano magnesium.
Yeah.
Dr. Gunderson.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll be having a chat with him pretty soon as well.
That's what I recommend. If people are having anxiety problems or something like that, magnesium works really well.
Yep. Yeah, it's a muscle relaxant, and it's I guess it's a general relaxant, and it also chelates a lot of heavy metals, from what I understand. Yeah, it was one of the first natural products I ever started promoting back in mid-90s was magnesium chloride. Back then, magnesium oil and bath flakes but nobody knew about magnesium then. Everybody was, oh, now we got magnesium. Now everybody's taking magnesium and looking. Now you can buy it on the corner store. So.
Yeah, Epsom salt baths are really good to relax, and you know, it's something that most people need to do once in a while is chill, you know, because it's society is just pressuring us more and more all the time. Like, oh, you got to keep up, you know, you got to make more money. You have to, you know, put up with all this political stuff that's going on and stuff like that. And,
yep. Well, we'll have to send you some Miracle 2 and you can have a Miracle 2 bath, which is it's extremely relaxing and detoxifying at the same time.
Yeah. You know, your skin's the largest organ in your body, right? Yep. Take care of it.
That's it.
Clean it out once in a while.
Yeah. Oh, very good. You've got some more questions there, I believe, Elijah.
Yeah, I was interested in how iodine was first discovered. Could you tell us that story?
Oh, it might take a couple minutes, but if you got a couple minutes, sure, why not? Napoleon, this goes back a couple hundred years, was fighting the British across the channel. And, he had been pretty successful with a lot of his adventures. But the channel posed a barrier for him that he didn't quite know how to deal with. And at that time, both the British and the French had cut down all the trees to make charcoal so that they can make gunpowder, right? Charcoal and sulfur, mix them together and makes gunpowder. Well, there weren't any trees left. They cut them all down. And even today, if you go to England, you got to go to a special reserve to even see a tree.
Oh, yeah. That's a lot of
This
gunpowder.
is 200 years later. So one of his people in command said, I've got an idea. Let's go to the ocean. Let's go to the channel, pull some seaweed out. We'll put it in a vat and we'll cook it down and we'll see if we can make charcoal out of it. And Napoleon said, okay, let's try it. So they're cooking this slurry down. It's like a soup. And it's in a kettle pot. It's made of copper. And they're stirring it and stirring it. And then they add some acid to try and get it to break down, right? And this purple haze comes rising up off the surface of the slurry. And around the edge of the copper pot were these crystals. So they didn't know what this stuff was, but they took a sample of it and they took it to the lab. And lo and behold, they called it, the Latin word was for iodine is actually means purple haze.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. Excuse me while I kiss the sky.
Yeah.
Anyway, they didn't know what to do with it, but they realized that they had discovered a new element. And so, I mean, there were a few people that tried to figure out what to do with it. The French were pretty creative, but they didn't really know what to do with it. And there were some other people in some other countries that were looking at trying to figure out what to do with it. And they started experimenting with it as sort of like to kill viruses like Pasteur and, they had some success with this stuff and bacteria. Because, a couple hundred years ago, that's what killed most people. Either the bacteria or the viruses will get you, one or the other. And there's an adjunct story that I can tell you that ties Casey directly to this, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's this Indian guy, and his name is Sankar Bissi, and he hears about this test that the British are doing to try and figure out whether the Indians are capable of scientific thought. And Sankar is pretty well educated. This is 200 years ago. I mean, not 200. This was about 140 years ago. And Sankar was up for the challenge. There was a bunch of other people that entered the contest, and nobody could figure out. It's an engineering problem, but Sankar figured it out. And the British thought, oh well, this. It's kind of hard to imagine, but this is the way the British thought. They didn't know whether the Indians were capable of doing this kind of thing. So they said, listen, do you want to go to England to go to university? And he said, yes, sure. He was relatively young. And so he gets on a boat and they sail around the bottom of Africa all the way up to England. And he starts going to school and he's in there for a while, but after a while he's feeling, he's not feeling well. And as time progresses, he really is sick. And turns out he had malaria. And The British were capable of dealing with malaria probably as well as anybody, but they didn't know how to fix it. And so after a while, Sunker gets so sick that he finally decides he's just going to go back to India to die. And he gets back on a boat, and they stop in France on the way out. And some guy comes on board and he says, "Listen, I've heard about your flight. I don't know if this is going to help or not, but we have this black gooey stuff that we don't know what to do with, but we might be interested in trying it and see what happens because, we've heard good things about it." So Sunker goes on, into town and he finds this stuff, this guy that has this stuff, and he starts taking it. And he gets back on board the boat and they sail all around, which takes weeks basically to sail all the way back to India. By the time he gets back to India, he's completely cured himself of malaria. And the light bulb comes on and he says, I'm going back to England, and he does. And he's healthy and happy and, he goes through his education. But in the back of his mind, he's always thinking, I want to do something with this iodine. And nobody in England really picks up on it. So he ends up getting on a boat and going to New York. And he's married at this time. It's years later. And so he finds a source for iodine and he starts producing it and becomes, he labels himself as a doctor because this is back before he really needed, credentials. And, he starts treating people. And this was back, he was sort of a contemporary of Casey's. And in the 20s and 30s, he's doing these experiments and he's curing a lot of people of incurable diseases with this so-called iodine, but he's also, a lot of people are having bad reactions to it. So he hears about Casey and he writes to him and he says, what's going on here? And Casey does a reading for him. He says, yes, this is the answer you're looking for, but you have to run it through this electrification process first. And when you do, then it'll be in a form that the body can fully recognize and assimilate. So he does that. And sure enough, there were records in the Casey readings where he cured tens of thousands of people, everything under the sun. I don't know if that stuff is still there or not. Probably not. But it's just a phenomenal story. And, you can look up Sunker, because he's still, but that part of the story, you probably aren't going to hear. But he became quite famous. And then, as he was getting older, he did get ill and he finally passed on. And I think about 1935 or something like that. And he left business to his son, and his son didn't know what to do with it, so he sold it to a pharmaceutical, and they put it on the shelf, and there it sat until I came home.
Oh, wow. It's amazing it's been around that long.
Napoleon isolated iodine in 1811.
Wow.
But they didn't know what to do with it.
Yep. They made a movie. I saw a movie a little while back, The Man Who Knew Infinity, and it was a similar type of story, but I think he was there was nothing about iodine. He did the same thing. He was in India, came to England and studied over there and got sick and shipped him back to India. It's a very similar story, except there's nothing about the iodine. Story. Yeah, but there was nothing about the iodine.
Oh, right.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, see, it's too bad. If you start to look at why things are the way they are, you just have to dig a little deeper to find out why, things happened or what the answers are that you're looking for. You just have to look, And, I spent 10 years in Virginia Beach looking at the Casey readings. And it took that long to get a fundamental understanding of what they're about.
Yep.
And, as I tried this stuff the way Casey talked about doing it, then I had success. But I was the only person who spent that amount of time there looking at this stuff and saying, well, let's just do it the way Casey said. Everybody else wanted to run off and become instantly rich and famous.
Mhm. I was going to say, now you're rich and famous.
Yeah.
After all the millions of people that have watched this video.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, who knows? Maybe someday I will be. I don't know. But, I've been at this for about, let's see, about 50 years.
50 years. Wow.
Altogether, from the time I first started looking at the Casey stuff. It's a whole lifetime event,
Mm. Mm. Well, you're looking pretty good for however old you are.
I am 69 this weekend.
69. Wow. Well, happy birthday. So it's my daughter's birthday this weekend as well.
Oh, well, happy birthday to her.
Yeah, 26th.
Yeah, it's a great age.
She's not 69 though.
I got some questions here from some customers that were sent in.
Oh yeah, sure.
Now would be a good time to read them out. So Maria says, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my concerns regarding a recent diagnosis of hypothyroidism, including a small cyst, not testing positive, and also for your email and call to inform me regarding of the well-timed interview with Phil Thomas, which I am grateful. I have been taking the detoxified iodine in the last 3 months, along with neutralizer and liquidized zinc. The cyst seems to have developed during the 3-month period of taking detoxified iodine and neutralizer, or maybe become noticeable in that period, which is a part of the reason that prompted me to seek diagnosis. My inquiry at this point is about dosage and any other suggestions that could enhance the treatment. I am currently down to 2 drops detoxified iodine, following the suggested protocol, since I have refused to take synthetic medication, as I am a faithful advocate of natural health by supporting the body's wisdom to self-heal. Regardless of the doctor's warning, you must take this medication and review for dosage adjustment in 6 weeks, or you'll get sicker. Warm regards from Maria.
What was that last bit about? I didn't quite understand that.
So she's just saying, regardless of the doctor's warning, the doctor was saying you must take the medication, which I'm guessing is the thyroid medication.
Okay.
And then review for dosage in 6 weeks, or you'll get sicker. So, yeah.
You have to look at the medical community and say, well, they're trying to figure it out. They just have a sort of a roundabout way of going about doing it. It's once they figured out that goiter was directly correlated to iodine deficiency, they started doing these things where they give people it's mostly synthetics, but originally it was really just iodine, and they had problems with it, and then they thought, well, the synthetics don't seem to be causing as many problems, but the synthetics don't really work as well because the body doesn't know what to do with it. So yeah, good that she's not doing the synthetics, I guess. As long as she's got the real thing, then the thing I tell people, look, get into it as a part of a healthy lifestyle where you're doing it as a rinse and a gargle. And the other thing I would suggest is don't think that everything else that you're doing is necessarily advantageous, because if you got into this situation somehow in the first place, you got to look at all these different things, like, are you doing too many supplements? Are you in a bad environment, or what kind of, you gotta look at everything. It's like, maybe you have a bad reaction to eating strawberries, but you don't notice it because you love strawberries and you eat them all the time. You know, it's one of those things where you have to actually analyze for yourself what's going on in your own life. And maybe there's one or two things that about your environment that are really not healthy or something that you're not really aware of because you're just used to having that as part of your routine.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So that cyst, it could have been developing for longer before, taking iodine, things like that, and could have just gotten progressively worse.
Usually
as well.
cysts have to do with the fact that the body isn't eliminating properly. So Casey talks about castor packs. He talks about colonics. He's talking about, fruit and vegetable diet. He's talking about drinking fluids, but not while you're eating, because that dilutes the stomach acids that break the food down. So you don't want to be drinking fluids while you're eating.
Yeah, and you always heard that it's good to drink fluids while you eat because it
Mm.
helps the digestion or whatever. But
Just
Yeah.
the opposite.
I'm going to cut this piece out and send it to my grandchildren because we had this discussion the other day, and when I got there to look after them, their mother goes, "They're allowed to eat, they're allowed to drink while they're eating," because I was so worried about me telling them you shouldn't be drinking fluids while you're eating.
Yeah, you can drink some before, or maybe give it an hour after.
Mm.
We're all programmed to think that we're supposed to be drinking, and then the worst part of, like, I don't know how it is over there, but man, everybody eats fast food here, and the fast food is burgers and fries and drink, like Coke.
Yep.
I live in Atlanta, the home of Coca-Cola, and it's
Wow.
just astounding to me. It's like people don't realize about a quarter of that can of Coke is just raw sugar.
Mm.
it's pretty intense.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's like, oh, they have a new Dr. Pepper out now. I just saw the advertisement for it. No sugar.
Mhm.
Well, this stuff's got to be really deadly because it's going to be just as sweet as the cane sugar that they put into this stuff. But they're not using cane sugar anymore. They're using some kind of synthetic sugar.
Mm.
Yep.
And it's making it just as sweet. And it's like, it's got to be really bad.
It freaks me out thinking about that. But oh,
Yeah, well, I was always taught you should drink water on an empty stomach. So that's my little input. Thanks,
Yeah.
Thanks, grandkids.
I've got another question here. They said, "Hi all, this is great. Thank you. I use Miracle 2 Australia iodine. Does detoxified iodine assist a person who was convinced by the medical complex, had their thyroid cut out? Can the body utilize the iodine without the thyroid? Obviously, they are on a destructive thyroxine and have had the recent needle. Would iodine assist them with something in any way, or is it unusable to be utilized?"
Usually the medical doctor will leave some of the thyroids in, like I say, to bounce off the meds. The meds have to bounce off something, otherwise they're just going through your system. So they never tell you that they do that, but they usually do.
Okay.
Did you ever ask a doctor anything? The chances are, it's like you'd have to know what questions to ask, and then you'd have to pry it out of them.
Yeah, I know my my ex-wife. She didn't have she had a thyroid removed, but she still had a parathyroids apparently.
Yeah.
And yeah, the iodine really helped her with her medication. And I think she actually reduced her medication because the iodine was helping so much for her, so she could drop it down slightly. But yeah, it definitely helped with her T cells and how to with her tests after that.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, you want to know a funny thing? She's actually just ringing me right now. We're still very good friends, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
it's
knew
good.
you were talking about her.
Yeah, that's it.
It's good that at least the doctors leave a bit of your thyroid in. That way you can still utilize the iodine.
Mm.
And then the other thing I was going to say about the first question was this lady got hyper. That's very unusual. You know, hyper is about, less than 5% of the overall cases. Everybody's got hypo, which is low thyroid.
Okay. Yep.
Hyper is a
right.
different kind of thing. Yeah, but it's very serious too. So yeah, it's a matter of trying to bring the thyroids back into the range of normal, not too high, not too low. You want homeostasis. You want to be in the middle.
Mhm. So hyper thyroidism. What are the symptoms of that?
Of hyper,
Yes.
most of the people are very skinny, believe it or not, but that's not necessarily going to tell you whether it's hyper or not. But
Yep.
the thyroid speed up, so as opposed to slowing down.
Mm.
Um, it's difficult because there's so many variables, but
Yep.
when people get a lot, and like I say, it's sometimes correlated to the diet corrections and stuff like that too. So, there's a little more to it than just the iodine.
Yep. So basically, it speeds up your metabolism.
Yeah.
Your thyroid's controlling your metabolism. So if you got a fast metabolism, it's hyper.
Burns
And,
up. Yeah.
yeah, and if it's hyper, you'll have a slower metabolism. You tend to put on more weight. So
if you go to Japan, do you find any overweight people?
Yeah, they're all quite slender.
yeah.
They get a lot
Good
of
point.
iodine in their diet,
Yeah.
and they're healthy and they're not overweight. It's just almost the opposite in the US.
Yep. And is it true that the detoxified iodine will normalize under and overactive thyroid?
Yes.
No, that's good to
It's
know.
another thing the medical community does not understand. And part of the reason they don't like messing with raw iodine is because they don't think that, it'll correct the situation by bringing them back into the norm.
Yep. Oh, very good. Thank you for that.
Interesting. Got another question. Hi there. I was taking 4 drops a day and had my bloods tested, and my iodine was 5 times higher than the recommended dose. My doctor said this could lead to thyroid issue. It was giving me great energy. I have chronic fatigue, but I'm very nervous of creating another problem for myself. Was the energy a false thyroid energy? Thank you.
What I tell people is like, they say, well, what am I supposed to do? And I say, well, I don't know. I used to have a practice actually, and then eventually after about 10 years, I evolved to the point where I became a facilitator, right? Where I'm just making this stuff. And because there are a lot of variables, but you got to help people get to a point where they can help themselves. Because if you're just giving them a crutch and then they become dependent on you, that's not actually helping anybody. You want that person to get to the point where they are asking the questions themselves based on how they feel. Okay, well, this person feels much better. Then why is it that they need the doctor to tell them that they don't feel better? Or it might not be good. Because that's the way the medical community is kind of programmed. They don't want people actually thinking for themselves. How else are you going to become dependent on their medications and pay them hundreds or thousands of dollars, to, buy these drugs if you don't need them to tell you what to do or what to think? you know, this is the hardest part for people to understand. The thyroids are actually your will center. That's the strongest power on earth, your free will.
Mm-hmm.
So when you relinquish that, you basically give up everything and you turn into one of these dummies that's walking around the street thinking that they have to listen to some politician or some doctor or something like that or maybe a religious person tell them what to do or how to think. You don't need that. What you need as an individual is to take control of your own decision-making process. And you can't do that when your thyroids are down.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. That's where you see people when they are sick, they really struggle to really function on any level. You know,
It's perfectly understandable.
For sure.
People don't feel well, they get depressed. Of course they're going to get depressed. People say,
Yeah.
oh, well, you shouldn't be depressed. No, you should be depressed. That's a normal human reaction to not feeling well.
Yep. Thank you for that.
That's very interesting. Another question is, someone said, I have lymphoma in my left groin area on top of my hip. Doctors want to radiate it, but I want to go the natural way. I heard from the Alpha Omega Institute in America to rub the atomic iodine in the area, then apply frankincense and coconut oil on afterwards. What do you think about this?
It sounds okay to me. Radiation is a weird thing, you can't really smell it or taste it. None of your senses really pick up on it. If you notice that you go into these labs where they do these scans, the CAT scans and these different, where they rate, even a dental office, oh, we've got to take some X-rays of your mouth so we can find out, and it's great, because it tells them exactly what's going on. Well, we'll just put this lead collar around your neck so that you won't get your thyroids. Basically, that's what it's for. It's for your thyroids. But your thyroids, here's the thing. There's two parts of your body that are hypersensitive to radiation. One is the thyroids, and then the other is the reproductive glands. And, we can talk about that more if you want. But when you put a lead collar around your neck, that doesn't stop the radiation that's inside your mouth from shutting the thyroids down when they take those x-rays.
Good point.
And if you notice that the kids that work in these places, they're not there for very long. They're there for a summer or something that, while they're not in school. And then they leave because they start feeling bad because they're getting exposed to all this radiation. Well, no, they're not. They've got lead-lined walls and the radiation can't go through lead. Yeah, but it can go through the doorway. And it does. And a lot of these dentists, I don't know how it is over there, but as far as the medical community goes in this country, dentists kill themselves more often than any other profession.
I've heard that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because they're getting all this radiation every day. It's dangerous stuff.
Yeah, it's in everything, and I feel it if I'm in a car and someone's got their 4G on or 5G on their phone, I can feel it instantly. I'm like, I can feel the head pressure. My head starts heating up. They don't even have to tell me. I'm just like, someone's got their phone on 4G. Can you turn it off? Because it freaking hurts. Like I can't think properly and stuff.
The reproductive glands are the other part of the body. The rest of the body can handle large amounts of radiation. Actually, thyroids can't deal with it. I don't know why that is, but that's the way it is. If you stop and think about it, what's the number one medication that there is? Outsells all other medications.
Thy thyroxine? I don't know actually.
Is it Panadol?
Pan.
ED pills, erectile dysfunction.
Oh, really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
They sell millions of those pills in this country every day. Why? Why is that such a problem?
radiation.
Because of radiation.
Hmm. Wow.
And now you can get it discreetly through the mail. Yeah, and it's like that's the last joy that most men have. And it's like, oh man, if I don't have that, what good is, well, there's nothing left. And they don't realize that, yeah, sure, you can take a pill and throw your blood pressure out of balance and all this other stuff. But you can do it naturally too by just, including some detoxified iodine in your regimen.
Wow.
And, that's how I'm really going to make some money.
You can have your erectile dysfunction iodine pills or something.
Yeah, the heck with thyroids.
Oh dear.
Oh, wow. Alrighty. I got one more question here. My question of iodine and Hashimoto's disease. As said, tried Lugol's and it had a terrible effect on me, as does thyroxine. Doctors are urging me to take thyroxine again, but doesn't change much. While levels reduce, the rest of my body suffers. Early this year, my levels were almost 300, and I reluctantly, under the doctor's pressure, took thyroxine. Same thing occurred, levels dropped to under 40, but so did I. Overheating, nausea, anxiety, and so much more. I haven't tried the Miracle 2 iodine. Could it help? From Christy.
There's receptor sites on the thyroids. The thyroids are covered with these sites that are designed specifically to capture iodine, right? And when you take the iodine, most of it goes right to the thyroids. The second place actually is the breast. So women are having trouble with cysts, breasts, you got to look at they got to look at the lymphatic system and stop using aluminum antiperspirants and stuff like that. But you've also got to get some iodine in your system because that's the second most, that's the area where more iodine is absorbed, except for the thyroid. So when the receptor sites get clogged up with heavy metals and debris, other kinds of things in the system that lodge in those sites, the iodine can't get in. And that's what happened with this person. Hashimoto's is an iodine deficiency.
Wow.
That's why they have Hashimoto's, yes. And if you clear that debris out of the receptor sites, the iodine will be able to get in and get off the rest of this doctor stuff.
Very good.
So how do you do that? Casey had this thing called sulfur salts, which bonds to the debris in the tissue and it pulls it out and
okay, yep,
flushes it out of the system.
Yeah, I have seen you. I've seen that on your website. I didn't really understand what that was for. So that's for specifically flushing the thyroid receptor sites.
No, actually, it's for any kind of debris, particularly heavy metals.
Yep.
And, we're all dealing with that to a certain extent. Get that out of the system. So I was a house painter when I was a kid. And about half the time I was up on a ladder grinding lead paint off houses. And, I did it for many years. And eventually, I see, all these other guys that were doing the same thing, dropping dead,
Wow.
And I thought, well, maybe it's time to do something else. But for many, many years, I didn't know how to get that stuff out of my system. And, as I got older, I got weaker. And, I don't know, you know, I just wasn't in great health. And I figured out the sulfur salts, and I started taking it. And within a couple of weeks, I started getting my strength back, my physical strength back. I went,
Wow.
That's pretty
goodness,
quick.
you know.
Mm.
And you know, for me, I was lucky, you know, but for most people, you know, and it might be different for most people, but you know, you've got to look at the way the body works. And
Yep.
you know, if you live in a big city and you're breathing smog, the particulate matter in that smog, there's quite a bit of heavy metal in there. I mean, that's just one component of it, but it's bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So move.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
Get to the mountains.
mean, I had a lot of heavy metal problems, but I had a lot of Miracle 2 baths, and I don't have that problem anymore. Because it's such a drawing agent, it's slowly drawing it out of my body every day.
Oh, that's great.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. You know, people go through different processes trying to figure out how much of this or that or what's going to work. And, you know, it varies with the individual. So you can't say.
Yep. Yeah. Well, basically, I can see that, you know, the society we live in these days, we need to be detoxing every day, you know, just to keep healthy, just to keep normal. If you can do that and get on top of your virus load, you'll be very healthy. So,
Yeah.
detoxified iodine is definitely going to help with your your viral load and bacterial load.
It's amazing. It's amazing how the iodine fixes so many things. Like, you know, everything's always treated as like a separate thing and given a separate, you know, whatever else. But iodine does so much. It's pretty amazing.
Eventually, you know, people will figure it out. But, you know, it's going to take some time. And, you know, for instance, if you were to take, you know, rinse and gargle before you went to the dentist and had those x-rays, your thyroids would be pretty well protected.
Mm.
And every dentist should be doing that for their customers, but they don't know that. I was at somebody's house, and I was in this room, and this gal sat down, and we got into. There wasn't anybody else there, and she started talking to me about her work, and she had gone through dental school, and I mean, I'd never met her before, and she was telling me that she just had a baby, and young Indian lady, very interesting, very bright, and I had a bottle of detoxified iodine in my pocket. And she was talking about doing these deep cleanings. And I said, I put it on the table and I said, if you do this, you won't have to do deep cleanings anymore. You can provide your patients with this.
Mhm.
And she came over and she picked up the bottle and she looked at it. She put it back on the table and she literally ran out of the room. Because she just finished medical school. She's probably got $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 worth of debt. She just had a baby. You know, those don't come free anymore either. And she just started her practice and she's figuring out, okay, if I can do 3 or 4 deep cleanings a day, I can make an extra couple $1,000s. And that's how much it costs to live on planet Earth anymore, if you've got that kind of debt. Of course, that would fix it. That would correct the problem. But how is she going to pay, you know, her student loan when she's selling a bottle of iodine? She's only making $10 on it.
Yeah. It can be quite simple, isn't it, to heal? Like if you know what to take,
I don't blame
it
her.
can be quite cost effective.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, I know every time I go to the dentist, I take the gel with me, the Miracle 2 gel, and I rub that all over my face, and then again afterwards, and those injections wear off pretty quickly when you use a gel on them straight afterwards.
Nice.
I found. I'll have to try the iodine as well.
How does
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, how does iodine work with purifying water? I drink out of the tank water over here, and sometimes I get like a stomach upset, and then I drop a couple of drops of iodine into a bottle, and yeah, I don't get like a stomach upset from it. So it's like, does it just kill the bad bacteria in the water, or?
Yeah. Back during World War One, another history lesson here, but I'll keep it short.
I like your history lessons. Usually I don't.
Our troops were over there and they were bogged down in Europe, in the trenches. And even back then, which was 100 years ago, there was no clean water in Europe. All the overland water was polluted. Because, their history goes back a couple thousand years, and they've been polluting their water ever since, So our troops had silver. It was a standard issue in World War One. And they would fill up their canteen with water and it was dirty, but they dumped some silver in there and it would kill the bacteria. It's really good at killing bacteria. Kept our troops alive for days or weeks while they were in the trenches. The Kaiser didn't know about this for some reason. And the Germans eventually gave up. That's basically why we won the war.
Wow. Well, because of silver.
Yeah. Now, I don't recommend taking silver because it's a heavy metal. But, it's really good at killing bacteria.
Yeah. What about colloidal silver?
No.
Yeah.
It's still a heavy metal.
Mm.
It's just small particles.
Yep.
It's time to get caught up in the receptor sites of the thyroids and shut them down.
Wow.
Is that the same with colloidal gold?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Gold and silver. That's how I back when I was doing my research in Virginia Beach, that's how I cured all these people, these degenerative disorders, was with gold and silver. Gold is a very powerful regenerative vibration. There's nothing more powerful than that.
Wow.
And silver is a nerve stimulant. So when you're dealing with degenerative nerve disorders, you have to stimulate the nerve tissue. But I didn't do it orally. I did it vibrationally. So when you introduce the vibration into the body, you don't have to worry about all those heavy metals getting built up in the body.
So how would you do that vibrationally?
You have a biomagnetic battery. It's the same battery that I use basically to charge the iodine.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And you have a couple of poles that are immersed in this acid solution. And then you have another, like a small, like a baby food jar that has a loop in it. And you put the silver or the gold solution in that jar, and then you connect wires to it. So that is in line with one side of the circuit, and then the wire, wire comes off the poles and connects to that side. And you have cups on the other ends of the wires that connect to the body. And you actually introduce the vibration right into the body.
Oh, okay. Yep. So yeah, because you'd be making colloidal gold or silver in that little jar, wouldn't you?
It's gold chloride and silver nitrate. That's what you use for this.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I wasn't doing any soliciting, because what I was doing was I was experimenting to see what would work.
Yep.
I didn't know whether it was going to work or not.
So if you were,
I still don't solicit.
Yep.
But I had about half a dozen during the time that I was in Virginia Beach, which was during the 90s, I had about a half dozen people with MS, which is actually pretty common, come by, and I worked with them, and then they take the equipment home and use it, and they all recovered.
Wow. So that's really cool. So
That's what got me in trouble.
if you got MS, it'd be a good idea to get a job in a gold vault, and just be at the gold bullion center and collect that energy.
Just breathing it in.
Get a job there, yes. Yeah, it's miraculous. It really is. It's another one of those Casey things that eventually will come back to the surface. But people have to be ready, and I mean, they weren't too happy about it. Let me put it that way.
No, I know what you mean.
I wouldn't mind getting one of those machines now, but yeah, I suppose it'd be hard to come by nowadays.
I can show you how to do it, or I could even build you one if you want, but it's a little bit expensive because the gold's really expensive.
Yeah, and, for sure.
The equipment's a little bit expensive.
Yep.
I mean, it's not out of reach. It's just the organization, after they suppressed my work, they went on to basically just shut the readings down as a whole.
Wow. Yep. We'll have to talk to you more off air about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's all my questions. I think I had one more question, and someone asked, does the iodine ever go off? What's its shelf life?
No, I don't think it does. Like I say, I've been working with it for quite a while, and what I've read is that it doesn't actually have a shelf life. It will last indefinitely.
Wow.
Yeah, I could imagine it would. I mean, if it's an element, what's going to break it down? It's like magnesium going off.
The sunlight will break it down.
Okay, yep.
And excessive heat also can break it down. But you don't really have either of those.
Yep.
You're okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
I used to put it in these bottles with droppers, rubber droppers on the top.
Yep.
I did that for years, and then eventually I figured out that, that wasn't so great because, it could evaporate right through the bulb, and those bulbs eventually would break down.
Yep, I remember those. How you used to have those, yeah.
Yeah. So I use a Euro cap, which has a hard plastic insert in the neck of the bottle, and has a little hole in the middle. You turn it upside down, drips out.
Yep.
And so that was really the last of the issues for storing it.
Yep. Wow.
Interesting.
Very good. Well, it's been very enlightening talking to you, Phil. I'm sure our listeners will get a lot out of this as well. I gather there's a lot we can't really say too much about, but hopefully YouTube will let us put this one on with. There might be a few words that I don't like, but we'll find out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, whatever it is, it is. It's like you got to be honest. Like I say, it's not my intention to go on some kind of rampage about the medical community or something. I try and help as many doctors as I possibly can. There aren't very many that are ready to, learn anything. They think they already know everything there is to know. And they, a lot of them do know a lot of stuff. I don't have any formal education, but Casey didn't either.
Yeah, well, that's it. When you connect to your higher self, that's all the education you need.
All the information's out there, eh? Just gotta look for it. But
very good.
Yeah, thank you very much, Phil. That was awesome. Yeah.
Was
My
great.
pleasure, really.
You're a wealth of information.
Mm. Must be getting late for you over there. It's probably time for dessert after dinner.
It is, yes. It's 8:08 here in Atlanta, and yeah, we have Thanksgiving. I don't. You guys don't have it over there?
No, no.
We've,
Okay.
we've now got Black Friday or whatever it's called, Cyber Friday from you guys. So
Yeah.
I think Thanksgiving's on its way.
Yeah. So
Yeah, no, yeah,
Thanksgiving was today. Is that right?
yeah,
Wow.
Oh,
We
happy
picked a-
Thanksgiving.
we picked a good day for that, didn't we?
yeah. It turned out great. I just finished. My wife is like an excellent cook, and she likes doing that once in a while, where she just gets into it, you know.
Yep. Oh, well, that's
That's
very
good.
good. Thank you for talking to us on such a prestigious day over there. It's quite big for you over there, isn't it?
Really, my pleasure. Anytime, I can help. I'm always happy to try.
Well, we're very grateful for you talking to us on Thanksgiving Day. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank
you,
you.
Phil. We'll talk more, and we'll talk again.
All right, sounds good.
All
Cool.
right.
Cheers.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
All
Bye
right,
bye.
have a great day.
You too.
Cheers. Bye.